he joins us for more. So Andy, of course we know the widespread effects of corruption, and so often in the news we'll ask questions about this country or that country. Why is their economy stalled? Corruption. Why is there such a divide between rich and poor? Corruption. So in the past 10 years, would you say globally this problem has gotten worse or better?
I don't think it's gotten worse. I think it's gotten better, or at least our ability to identify instances of corruption and to have effective enforcement actions against them has gotten better. We know more about corruption. We see more stories about corruption in the media, but that's often because we're uncovering these stories and we're prosecuting people for it. So too do we see an increasing worldwide consensus that corruption is not just a bad thing, but something that we should address, that we should change. And so more people are talking about corruption. So I would say that we are more aware of corruption. There's more public discussion of it, but that's not because the corruption itself is worse. It may actually be on an upward trajectory in reducing corruption. I very much think that's true.
And in recent years, we've seen some countries very much in a high-profile way pledge to try to root out corruption. We've seen this in India and Ukraine, for example. So has it worked?
Well, some places yes, some places no. Rooting out corruption is an easy phrase to use, and it's probably used insincerely more often than not. But there are also countries that have made dramatic inroads against corruption. Think of Brazil, for example, with its much publicized Lava Jato enforcement action, probably the furthest reaching anti-corruption enforcement action in the world. That in a country where just a handful of years ago, corruption was thought to be endemic and intractable. So we do see changes. China, though we're talking a lot about its human rights violations now, China has prosecuted approximately 2 million officials in the last 10 years for corruption. Think of that. So we're definitely making progress. We have a long way to go.
Yeah, when you look at the indices of corruption that certain anti-corruption organizations put out, in the countries in the world where there is considered to be very low corruption, these are all very wealthy countries. People pay a lot in taxes. There's a kind of equalizing of society. Is that the key, or how do they prevent corruption?
Oh, I wouldn't say that that corruption is somehow a sign of a country having an unequal economy. Not necessarily. And I wouldn't say that to reduce corruption, you have to reduce social inequality with high taxation and so forth. We could talk about that a little bit, but I wouldn't say that's inherent. I do think that corruption, we have different degrees of success in different countries. It has to do a lot with whether the rule of law is in place. Yep. It has to do a lot with whether there's been a groundswell of domestic pressure, political pressure to address corruption. It has to do with cooperation with international organizations and other countries. But I think that it's nearly universally accepted that where a country can reduce corruption, it will be economically more prosperous, not less.
Got it. All right, Andy Spalding, really good to talk to you about this.